welcome to another episode of the Preparedness Podcast, the podcast that brings you the best in preparedness information. You can find us online at thepreparednesspodcast.com. My name is Rob Hannes, and I'm the host for the show. You can reach me via email at rob@prepcast.info. Now, the topic of the podcast tonight is going to be finding and building neighborhood preppers, or another way of looking at that would be reaching out to neighbors as a prepper. Before we get into that, though, I want to go over some announcements. If you haven't had a chance yet, check out the listener survey that PodTrack is doing. You can get to it by going to the website, clicking on the listener survey badge, and you'll be taken to the PodTrack site. It's a completely anonymous survey, unless, of course, you want to put your email in the comments, but otherwise it's completely anonymous. But it helps us build a better podcast. It helps by giving frank and honest feedback, because it's completely anonymous. That helps us kind of get a good idea of what you think and where we can kind of fine tune and other things that can help us make a better podcast. The Preparedness Podcast mini guide on surviving EMP is now out and available on Kindle. You can find it by going to Amazon and searching for Preparedness Podcast, or by going to the preparednesspodcast.com website, searching for mini guide if it's not still a sticky post at the top of the homepage. What the mini guide includes is a lot of information from the podcast, actually all the information from the podcast. However, I've expanded it in areas where the podcast was, I think it was 2 or 3 episodes and a bunch of website articles on EMP. I've taken those and I've expanded them so they're a little bit easier to understand the subject matter and the topic, as well as I've done a little bit more testing on Faraday cages, homemade Faraday cages, and what you can use and what works and stuff like that. And it's some really good information, and it's reasonably cheap, but I wanted to be able to make something that you guys could download and have offline that you could refer to. And I also wanted to be able to make it so that when I update it, as I continue to do more research and try to find out more about how we can protect our stuff and protect us and get ready for a possible EMP or CME event, I wanted you guys to be able to download it again without having to pay for the update. So it's my understanding that when I make an update, I can let Amazon know, and you'll be able to download the update. I'd like to mention that if you have any questions about preparedness or survival or anything along those lines, you know what? Go ahead and send me an email, and I'll do my best to answer it. Or if not, I'll redirect you to someplace that can answer it, or I'll do some research. I'll either answer it via email, or most likely I'll put it out on the podcast so everybody can learn from it, because that's what I think we should try to do. Is I think we should try to learn from each other. So if you have a question or a tip that you found that was really handy, you haven't seen elsewhere, go ahead and send out an in, and I'd love to share it with everybody. Now, I know a lot of you listen to the podcast while you're driving to or from work, or working in the yard, or doing other chores around the house or town or whatever. But the next time you're sitting at your computer, go ahead and like us on Facebook at facebook.com/preparednesspodcast, and follow us on Twitter at twitter.com/prepcast. This is one way that we can communicate with each other. You can ask questions. You can suggest podcast topics and stuff. Lately, what we've been doing, we've been putting some kind of cool pictures on Facebook, and either just making a comment about them, or asking, hey, what would you do in this situation? So head on over to Facebook and join in the conversation, because we'd like to have your feedback. Also, if you're listening to old podcasts and there's an advertiser that you're interested in, they may not be a current sponsor of the podcast. Advertisers constantly rotate out and stuff, and I expect, as time goes on, we're going to have a turnover in one fashion or another. However, whatever sponsor for the particular podcast that you're listening to and heard them on, they're going to be listed at the bottom of that show notes page. So if you go to, say, for example, this is episode 143, and we're going to be talking about Buy Emergency Foods. And if you want to go see who the sponsor was, or go click on the banner for Buy Emergency Foods, even if they're not a current sponsor, you'll still find a link to them at the bottom of the show notes. So if you search for episode 143, go to that post. At the bottom, you're going to see who the sponsors were. So there's always a way for you to be able to contact the advertisers. Oh, one more thing I almost forgot is that we've been putting up the podcast on YouTube. It's the same podcast that we're doing now. We're hoping to expand into other areas of actually doing videos, but for now, it's the same podcast. However, I found that some people find it easier to listen that way. So you'll find those at youtube.com/preparedness podcast. Before we get into the main topic, I want to talk about bioemergencyfoods.com, the sponsor for the podcast. Here on the Preparedness Podcast, we are huge proponents of having food storage. And one of the components of your food storage should be ready-to-eat meals, or meals that take a very small amount of time to make before you can eat them. And the foods from bioemergencyfoods.com fill that need because they taste good, they're packaged well, and they just recently announced that their entire line is 100% certified GMO-free. Now, a couple weekends ago, we made some of their pasta Alfredo as a side dish for our dinner, and we served it without telling the kids what it was. And here is what they said about it. Kids, what do you think of the pasta Alfredo?
Awesome!
Now, do you know that it's actually food storage food?
Yeah, I guess.
Yeah? You know that this can be stored for like 25 years?
Really?
Awesome!
Yeah? Would you mind eating this if we had to eat it a lot?
No, I would not mind.
I love it!
Now, I play that because I think it's important that children will eat the food you store. Bioemergencyfoods.com or preparewise.com. You can get to both of them by clicking on the banners on the website. Now, the topic for this podcast is reaching out to your neighbors as a prepper. One of the things that you've probably noticed if you've been a prepper for any length of time is how do you talk to other people about preparedness without actually letting them know that you're preparing and may have a household full of food and gear and supplies and stuff, because you want to maintain OPSEC while you're finding people who are of like mind. So in other words, how do we find other people that are interested in preparedness or might be interested without exposing that we're a prepper with a household of food? Now, because we're continually getting new people who are just starting off into prepping and they're just starting to listen to this podcast, I want to take a moment to explain what OPSEC is. OPSEC stands for Operational Security, and it means you keep your mouth closed and not tell everyone what you have and what you're doing. You don't want people knowing that you're a prepper, because if we were to have a catastrophic long-term disaster, you don't want people suddenly showing up on your doorstep begging for food. This leads to the dilemma of whether to give up some of your preps or to turn them away. Both can have serious consequences, and we cover some of this in other podcasts, and we'll cover more of this in upcoming podcasts. But I wanted to outline what exactly OPSEC was and why there's a problem with, reaching out to other people and saying, hey, I'm a prepper. Are you a prepper? Great. Let's prepare together. And suddenly something happens and you find out, hey, they don't have any food like they said, and they're on my doorstep asking for handouts. It's something you definitely need to consider. Now, ideally, you want to create a situation where you can meet people and not have them know where you live or even much about you. This can be achieved through several ways, but I think one of the best currently is probably using the website meetup.com. With Meetup, you can establish what your group is about and set up a meeting place where people can get together for a common purpose. So you might want to go to Meetup and search if there are any currently existing survival or preparedness groups that you can join, and you can go and kind of see how it works. Typically, they'll meet at a community center or a restaurant, or if somebody has a meeting room in one of the businesses that they work, there's typically somebody who's putting it forward, and they've made the decision to go ahead and kind of expose themselves as a prepper for the greater good of trying to get more people prepared. That's kind of like the decision I made to do the podcast. I am exposing myself by doing this, but I feel strongly enough about trying to get more people prepared because that's what makes a stronger community. So Anyways, but not everybody wants to do that, and that's completely understandable. Meetup is one of those ways that you can do this. Now, I'm sure there are other websites that do a similar service, and you may want to use one of those, but I'm familiar with Meetup because I belong to three Meetup groups. Two of them are about preparedness, and one of them is about website development and SEO. But it's a great way because people can get together and share ideas, and I found it worked very well for preppers because you only need to sign up with an email and a location, and you don't even have to use your real email. You could go to Gmail or Yahoo or Hotmail or one of those places and sign up for an email address and use that one and not have it really tied to you. So how can you use this to reach out to your neighbors? Now, I suppose if you had no issues with privacy and you didn't really care who knew that you were prepping, you could simply go door to door talking about preparedness. Hi, my name's Rob, and I'd like to talk to you about preparedness today. However, using good OPSEC, it would be pretty much impossible to talk to your neighbors without spilling the beans about being a prepper. And as we've already noted, that could be kind of bad. I've been giving some thought to this, and I've come up with a few ideas. I talked it over with my wife, and we kind of think we're going to try to do this ourselves. Now, I haven't done this, so I can't say how well it works, but I think it has merit. And so let's cover that. Now, the goal is to get your neighbors together and start interacting on a level that is conducive to getting them to start thinking like a prepper. You're also likely to get people who are already into preparedness showing up for these classes. And so by talking to these people, you might be able to identify some of those who might be preppers, or people might just come right out and say, oh, yeah, I've got food storage and I've got a evacuation kit and I'm ready for disasters. Because some people don't really understand OPSEC, and you may find out that they're a prepper that way. But the overall goal is to either get people to start thinking like a prepper, or start having classes where those who are preppers and aren't telling anybody start coming out and meeting other people who have similar interests. So this is kind of what I think you could do using a service like meetup.com. Now, keep in mind, you have to kind of know your neighborhood. Every neighborhood is different based on regionality and locality. Now, where I live, we have a lot of suburban neighborhoods, and so I would look at it from that standpoint. People who are in an urban area or a rural area, you need to take into account what type of people are living near you and how you could get together and stuff like that. Now, if you are lucky enough to have a community center that you can use, that would be really convenient to, having a place to do it, because you certainly don't want to do it at your house. So you would have to first find a place that you can hold a meeting. Then I would create a group on Meetup about, your neighborhood, and call it something like, neighborhood friendliness, reach out, something like that. That sounds benign, and it's kind of friendly and may get people involved. And then what I would do is I would start with like a basic CPR class, because everybody should know CPR. Everybody believes that everybody should know CPR, and there really is not any resistance to that sort of information. And you can have a class and find a CPR instructor, either Red Cross or American Heart Association, or maybe check with your fire department to see who can put on a class like that, preferably for free or for an extremely low cost, so you don't have a lot of out-of-pocket costs for this. Then when that's done, I would move on to first aid. Again, another basic skill that nobody should have any issues learning. And I would, you need to make sure that you can get the word out, either putting flyers out in everybody's house, or if you have an HOA or somebody who is managing the property for the neighborhood, perhaps they have an email list that they can blast out to advertise or market your class and your meetup. If you didn't have like an HOA or a central place that had a lot of a way to email your neighbors, you could just start with a word of mouth sort of thing, and start with maybe just a coffee club, get together and talk, or whatever. And then once you get enough people starting to spread the word, mouth to mouth in the neighborhood, then you could start launching these classes. Again, CPR and first aid are benign. The more people that know them, the stronger and better the community is, because you have more people who are able to render aid Now, hopefully, after you've had kind of maybe one or two neighborly meetups and a CPR and a first aid class, hopefully it's going well. And the next set of classes I would try to offer are the CERT classes. CERT stands for Community Emergency Response Team. And they teach the following topics: disaster preparedness, disaster fire suppression, disaster medical operations, light search and rescue operations, disaster psychology and team organizations, and then there's a disaster simulation. Now, unlike CPR and first aid, this isn't a very quick class. It's not like a one-time thing. It's typically taught over 7 weeks, 7 classes, about 2.5 hours each. So it does take a commitment level to do this. However, the people who have a prepper mindset, whether they know it or not, gravitate towards these type of classes. And this is where you're going to really start to see those people who have a high potential for being either closet preppers or potential preppers. And so if you can offer this, and honestly, even if you don't get anybody as a prepper, as a local prepper that you can coordinate with or talk to in your neighborhood, the fact that you're teaching your neighbors CPR and first aid and CERT skills, you're increasing your neighborhood's ability to take care of themselves in a disaster, because the more people that have medical training and first aid training and you know how to use a fire extinguisher and know how to render basic first aid and do some minimal search and rescue operations. And actually, I shouldn't say minimal, because they're actually pretty decent. I've been through the CERT class. I have a CERT certification. And it's actually a really fun class. It's a neat class, and you learn things about how to, lift heavy objects off a person safely, how to use a fire extinguisher properly, and good skills that you would need if a disaster came to your neighborhood. So even if you weren't able to find any preppers, I think that passing on these skills to your neighborhood, it would be a really good thing. Additionally, you will have gone a very long way in getting to know the people that live next to you and around you. And this is one of the reasons that I really want to try to do something like this, probably starting next spring. Because here in the desert, our winter is kind of like everybody else's summer. It's cool enough to go out and do stuff. So trying to plan stuff like this during our winter would probably not yield a lot of participants, because there's plenty of stuff to do during the winter. But however, during the summer, when most people tend to stay inside where it's cooler, that's what I think we're going to try to do, because I would like to know more of my neighbors. We have block parties and stuff, but I think the more we do together, I think the better community building that it does. Now, as I had mentioned, you do need to know your neighborhood. So after these classes, or honestly, if you feel that your neighborhood's not ready to go to CERT, here are some other ideas for classes that you might want to, hold for your neighborhood meetup group. Gardening, especially local information for your area. For example, what types of plants grow best and how to work the local soil. Some places in the country, you can throw seeds down and grow whatever you want. But like here in Arizona, it takes a certain type of plant. You can't grow everything or anything, or you can only grow it at certain times of the year. Also, our soil is a lot like concrete, and so you need to treat it, and you need to make sure that it has the proper pH, and you're doing stuff to it in order to actually make things grow. And I know from personal experience trying to grow things in a garden out here, I don't have enough time to actually work the soil like you're supposed to, which is why I can't get anything to grow. However, I would be interested in a gardening class that basically taught me the very specific things I need to do for the ground and the local soil here. Ham radio is a good class. There's a lot of people who might be interested in that as far as a way of communication and stuff. Ham radio goes through ups and downs as far as interest level, but it's something that you can offer in the you can contact the ARRL.org people and find out who in the area puts on classes, and those are always free except for the cost of course materials. A canning class might be something to look into. A lot of people with the economy are looking at making food lasts longer, and buying things in bulk when it's cheaper, and canning it is one of those ways to do that. And of course, that goes hand in hand with gardening. Another couple of classes might be sewing. Sewing is a survival skill, even though I don't think it's typically a man's skill, but I've sewed, and it is definitely a survival skill. So the more people that can sew, you would definitely be able to make things, especially clothes and stuff in a disaster time. Self-defense is usually a popular class. If you can find somebody come in and give some decent self-defense classes. Now, you need to be careful because a lot of places will, I've seen this around here at least, they'll give you like this demonstration where they don't teach anything. They just give a demonstration for 20, 30 minutes, and then they do nothing but advertise their service and try to get people to come to their classes. And that's not what I would be looking at. I'd be looking at somebody who either used to be an instructor or is willing to put in some free time for community service, stuff like that. Also, another set of activities are all the outdoor activities that you could have a neighborhood outing for hiking. That's an easy one to assemble and put on. You could do a neighborhood camping trip if you've got a place that's nearby that you and the neighbors and the kids can all go and have a great time. There's mountain biking, geocaching trips. That's where you're using a GPS to find different geocaches that people have placed around. There's fishing trips, and of course, all the winter and water sports. All these activities are things that you can get the neighborhood involved in. And again, part of it is just getting to know your neighbors. The more you know your neighbors, the better your community is going to suffer through a disaster, because you all know each other, you all care for each other, and you're going to be able to take care of each other better. Additionally, you're going to know and everybody else will also start to know whose skills are what. You're going to find out who is ex-military. You're going to find out who knows canning already. You're going to find out who knows or who has all the camping gear so that you can have a group meal made out in the middle of the street, who has all the shelter canopies and stuff like that. And so those are the kind of skills that you're going to be looking for, and that's what brings a community and a neighborhood together. So just getting people together, I think, is a very important goal just in and of itself. Now, these classes and all these events and running the meetup site and stuff, they all take an organizer, which should be you, because you're the person who's trying to, instigate this and pull it all together. However, that doesn't mean that you are the instructor for these classes. And I think, quite honestly, you should not be, unless you're certified to actually teach these things, and then you should consider it. But you know what? Even if you're certified, you might not want to do the teaching. In order to preserve your OPSEC, you should not make it known how much you know about preparedness. Now, if you're a CPR teacher or an instructor or a first aid instructor, okay, that might be fine and stuff. But some of these other things, you may want to keep it on the down low. However, you should be the clear front man or front woman for these events. You want people to be able to come to you and talk to you, as they're more likely to open up to the leader or the person in charge. And so all you need to portray publicly is that you thought these classes would be a good idea to learn in a good skill set, and you're bringing them to the neighborhood as, a good thing that you think people might want to learn. You don't need to couple the fact that you're a prepper and that these skills are prepper skills. It's okay. You can go ahead and play dumb and just let the instructor teach the class. And I think that's another reason why you probably shouldn't be the instructor, even if you are certified to teach these things, is you just want to be the organizer. You want to be the people that people come to and ask questions and stuff like that. But by deferring the expertise to somebody else, it's not making you look like you're the go-to guy for preparedness, because, again, you want to kind of avoid that for now. Now, think about what a neighborhood that had gone through these skill classes and learned these things, especially the first three of CPR, first aid, and CERT, how much better they would have fared through a Hurricane Sandy or Hurricane Katrina, because they're able to take care of themselves better. They have skills that they learned, and because they know the neighborhood a lot better, they're able to take care of each other. I think that builds a much stronger community. It would be great if we could actually openly and honestly talk to people about preparedness and have them come to a meeting where you or somebody who is capable of putting on a seminar about preparedness, who could convince people that live next to you, across the street from you, or in your area or on your street, to become prepared, and have these people say, you know what, that's a really good idea. I am going to get prepared, even if it was just minimally. That would be wonderful, because then in a disaster, everybody can pretty much take care of themselves and are in a better position to help their neighbors. Unfortunately, as much as we really like that to happen, that's not really likely, because we all know that a lot of people won't prepare. Even after they've gone through a disaster or a small disaster, they still refuse to take some sort of preparations. Now, I know, having been into preparedness for a long time and talking to people, it's my opinion that you can't make anybody want to prepare. You cannot convince them that it's a good idea. They have to come to it on their own. You can't tell them you should prepare and they go, oh, okay, I'm going to prepare. It doesn't work that way. You kind of have to open up their eyes, and if they're going to prepare, then at some point they're going to make the connection and they'll do so. Otherwise, they just don't. And that's how I've seen a lot of people do it, is that they hear you, they listen to you, but they don't really want to do anything. And you know what? You really can't make them. So that's why I think if you can teach these skills to people, so they're learning prepper skills without actually knowing they're learning prepper skills, or they learn these skills and they start thinking like a prepper and say, oh, it might be a good idea to have some food storage or a 72-hour kit or something like that. That's one way you can break through and get them to be more prepared without actually them realizing that they're being more prepared. Well, that pretty much wraps it up for this podcast. I want to thank you for downloading and taking a listen. You can reach me through the website at thepreparednesspodcast.com, on Facebook at facebook.com/preparednesspodcast, on Twitter as Prepcast, and of course you can always email me directly at rob@prepcast.info. So until next time, please remember to enjoy life and be safe.